Part 8. We've traveled through Tokyo, who still wants to simulate love? Author, Fei Se Hui-Xiang. Chapter 74. Shiina Kiyoshi sighed, who would have thought that his daughter might also have some ideas. He stared at the young man silently, and finally shook his head and said, I dare to try my best for the purpose. Asaba Kazuma said seriously, the Shiina family has a very strict family tradition, and there is a time limit for the senior sister to return home. Without Mr. Shiina's consent, I can't ask the senior sister to help. Therefore, although it is very presumptuous, please let Shiina-senpai continue to teach me my lessons. Please, Uncle Shiina. Shiina Kiyoshi looked deeply at Asaba Kazuma, and finally turned his eyes to his daughter and said, It's come to this point. I don't have much objection, but it won't affect your studies, right? No, it's still far from the upper limit, and there are a lot of things worth learning from Junior Kinyu. Hearing this, Fujiwara Masayama smiled and patted Asaba Kazuma on the shoulder and said, Work hard. Before leaving, Mr. Shiina glanced meaningfully at Asaba Kazuma, then turned around and went to tour the campus with Mr. Fujiwara. Seeing that the big boss of the level finally left, Shiina Kane looked at him angrily. Asaba Kazuma said happily with a smile in her eyes. Look what I'm doing. Someone was playing with fire just now. I won't say who it was. Hey, he even made me go to Uncle Shiina to ask for a status in person. It's really. Shiina Kane lowered her head in embarrassment. What he said was correct. She didn't think much about it just now. She just thought it was interesting to see him looking like he was winning, and she unconsciously wanted to see his panic expression. She used to be very well behaved, and this was the first time she played tricks when her father was about to come over. Now that Kinha Kazuma had exposed her, she blushed a little because she couldn't understand her thoughts. My mind is in turmoil. For a moment, I remembered the expression on Junior Kinyu's face when he looked at me and said, I want them all. After a while, I remembered his meaningful words, go and ask Uncle Shiina for a status. No, Shiina Kane, don't think about it anymore. She patted her cheek gently, trying to clear away the unnecessary thoughts, and then said. My dad agreed quite simply this time. Asaba Kazuma nodded and said, it's mainly because Ishijiro-sensei cooperated, and hinted that I had achieved something in the painting competition, and got Mr. Fujiwara's approval, and serialized me on Jump. Said. I have to find time to treat him to a nice meal tonight, it's a huge favor. Shiina Kane said in confusion, is this considered a favor? Asaba Kazuma glanced at her angrily and said, under normal circumstances, of course it's not a favor. But things are different today. Without Ishijiro-sensei to assist, you still have to make time to teach me. Shiina Uman was thoughtful. After a moment, she nodded again and said, Mr. Fujiwara also helped you. I am a student of Mr. Ishijiro, but I have nothing to do with Mr. Fujiwara. It's more about letting Dad decide whether he agrees to you being my little teacher. Asaba Kazuma spoke very calmly, but Shiina Kane suddenly felt a little ashamed and lowered her head a little. She suddenly remembered the morning when she took her to skip class that day. Kinyu Kazuma said to herself with a smile. Then you hurry up and follow me. Let me take care of the uncle and aunt's affairs. He is really thinking about himself. In this way, no one will interfere with the things you and I study in school, and you can feel more comfortable. Asaba Kazuma's sigh made Shiina Kane even more ashamed. She had misunderstood Asaba Kazuma before. After all, in her mind, if someone feels guilty about another person, there is a high probability that they have done something wrong. He didn't say anything either, which always left a thorn in her heart. But today, she suddenly realized that the thorn in her heart was not a misunderstanding, but a strong uneasiness. He knows a lot about himself, but I know very little about him. This unspeakable emotion spread like this, sour and astringent. But just today, seeing him earnestly trying to get her out of her father's hands and carefully playing all the cards she could, she suddenly felt that Junior Kinyu had really never done anything to feel sorry for her. She suddenly thought of his comforting words. He said, "There is nothing to be nervous about. In the future, I deduced, after you became famous, the principal personally begged you to come back to participate in the cultural festival. That scene was much grander than your father's." But when she asked him, he said she didn't go. Xiana Yuan is not an idiot. She soon realized that if his relationship with her had not changed, then it would be natural for them to go back to school together. But he didn't. That is to say, a guess flashed through Xiana Kane's mind, maybe the two of them would break up while walking in the future. So, does the guilt and uneasiness of Junior Kinyu stem from the missing of the two of them? The key point of missing is not that it was wrong, but that it was past. Once it's over, you can't get it back. Is that why he does this to himself? Although Xiana Uman had some problems with the details, she did roughly deduce Asaba Kazuma's mood. This idiot. After Xiana Yuan gave herself a reasonable explanation, she suddenly cheered. She sat on the table and inadvertently exposed half of her round and white calves, which were white and tender. Because she was in a good mood, she subconsciously shook them back and forth. Asahi Kazuma was not interested at first, but when she saw such a scene, she still subconsciously looked at the beautiful white porcelain calf, then looked up along her slender waist, and finally settled on her looking at him so cutely. On the cheek. Xiana Kane laughed, her dimples looming, which was really heartwarming. In this way, I will ask Junior Kinyu to take care of me after school. Haha, you should try your best to digest and absorb the relevant knowledge of gene stabilizing reagents as soon as possible, that is the most caring thing for me. I know. Xiana Kane suddenly got off the table, took a step forward, and approached him. Asaba Kazuma subconsciously took a step back and listened to the surrounding environment. He didn't hear the sound of Mr. Xiana's clogs. He looked suspiciously at the smiling Xiana Yuan. "Senior, please respect yourself. If you cross the red line, you will be out of control." "Then what if I just can't control it?" Xiana Kane said with a smile. After untying her knot, she felt that Junior Asaba looked a little more straight. Especially when he looks at her warily now. It seems that he has found the strong desire to explore again when he first discovered his abnormality. The feeling of wanting to eat it one bite at a time. "Senior Xiana, play with fire and burn yourself." Xiana Kane chuckled, "I thought you really had no idea at all. We've traveled through Tokyo, who still wants to simulate love?" Author, Fei Se Hui-Xiang. Chapter 75. After this incident, the Xiana family no longer stopped you and Xiana Yuan, and even acquiesced to give you two free control of part of the time after class in the afternoon. All this is within your expectation, but there are also some things that are beyond your expectation. She has become more smiling than before, and along with this, some changes have taken place in your relationship. She began to try to seduce you to accompany her out after you were tired from studying. You did not refuse. The afternoon sun seemed to reflect on the two of you, leaving two overlapping shadows. Qian Yufengjian frowned slightly. The relationship between the two progressed much faster than he imagined. The first simulation, which is related to this step, was after college. The second simulation, which was related to this step, was after he graduated and started preparing for the Tokyo University exam. But this time, Hien hasn't even graduated yet. Somehow, he suddenly wanted to eat candy apples. But he suddenly sighed again, a trace of hesitation flashing in his eyes. The relationship between the two was progressing quickly, and he should have been happy, but now he found that Hien's curiosity about adjusting genes was enough to quickly advance the plan, and he had a doubt. He has basically seen through Hien's temperament. She looks soft and weak, like a little loser who is easily bullied, but she is extremely stubborn on the inside. While simulating just now, Asahi Kazuma was wondering if it was really necessary to go further. If a simple hobby can make Shianakian devote all his energy to the further development of gene-stabilizing reagents, then, is it really necessary for him to continue to deepen their relationship? He was a little afraid that after the two of them crossed that critical node, once they tried their best in the simulation and still failed to achieve a sufficiently complete achievement before his death, would she? You hesitated. Not that you were willing to let her go. You are a greedy person. You have never forgotten the time she spent with you. If you have never forgotten, how can you let go? But, should we wait until Xiao Diankai has truly solved the death crisis before we consider going further? In this way, at least she may not shoot. But just by having this thought, unspeakable sadness spreads. Although Xianayuan did not notice the change in your mind, he keenly noticed that you became more taciturn. On this day, you sent her home. When you passed by a newly opened dessert shop, your eyes were subconsciously attracted. You often eat sweets to relieve stress. The advertisement of this dessert shop looks good. Ah, I suddenly feel like eating dessert, senior. Let's finish tutoring early tomorrow. You said this. Xianauman tilted his head thoughtfully. After school the next day, near the end of tutoring, she quietly left the office. The scene unfolds. Asaba Kazuma looked at her and trotted out of the office. He glanced at the direction Xianayuan ran out. That direction seemed to be the locker room of Heikuin High School. What is this idiot doing? A look of curiosity flashed in his eyes. The simulation's perspective is split in two at this moment. In the dressing room, Xianayuan hummed a song and took out the clothes from the garment bag. These are the clothes I carefully selected. Xianayuan's slender waist was exposed, with a slight blush on her face. After putting on her upper body clothes, she turned around in front of the mirror. Shouldn't he find out that I dress up deliberately? Really, sometimes I still want to wear more feminine clothes, but he keeps holding back and refuses to confess. Xianakian looked at herself in front of the mirror and encouraged herself in a low voice. He should like me wearing such clothes. It looks more innocent. It shouldn't be too much to wear like this. I remember that in the comics he drew, I really liked this type of female character. As he was thinking about it, Xianakian suddenly became a little lost in thought, bent his legs slightly, and said in a tone that was like trying to hide something from others. Anyone thinks, this is a costume for eating new desserts after class. I just happen to want to eat the same thing. I happen to not want to wear a school uniform, and I happen to be sitting across from you. Yes, that's it. Xianauman thought of Asaba Kazuma's somewhat depressed mental state during this period, and paused. Her expression became tangled. If he keeps sluggish, I'm going to be affected. Well, why don't we change his clothes to inspire him more? Yes, I just think he's going to affect me. She subconsciously looked at her watch and found that nearly 20 minutes had passed. Why does time fly by so fast? No matter, let's just pass by like this. She put on her white shoes again in a panic and hurriedly ran towards the classroom where Asaba Kazuma was. He will compliment me on my dressing up, right? I'm very attentive. Xianakane lingered at the door of the office for a long time, wanting to wait for him to come out, and then go there together as a matter of course. But after waiting and waiting for a long time, I still didn't get it. She was anxious and quietly poked her head in. Only his backpack could be seen in the empty office, but his figure was not seen. At the same time, from Asahi Kazuma's perspective, Kinya Kazuma heard the familiar sound of small steps and quietly stuck her head out. He saw Xianakane lingering repeatedly at the door of the office. She was not dressed in student clothes, and it was the first time he had seen her in the simulation. It was obvious that she had put a lot of thought into the selection. The small white shirt and sports shorts revealed a pair of long, white legs, which made his eyes light up. This was something Xianayuan would never wear before. He can be sure. And That's not what you should wear to a normal school at all, but something to dress up for a date. He lowered his footsteps slightly. Hyun's hearing had always been very keen, and it was not that easy to get close to her quietly. It took him a while to get behind her after hiding in the corner. Xianyuan lowered her head in frustration. Where did this bad guy go? I dressed up specially. Really, it's only been 20 minutes and he didn't even wait for me. There wasn't much complaint in her voice, more like she was regretting why she didn't come out sooner. It's rare to see her like this, she's quite cute. Asahi Kazuma originally wanted to look at her for a while longer, but instinctively felt a little reluctant, so he quietly took a step forward, chuckled behind her and said. You're so slow, Shiana-senpai, I've already gone to have snacks and come back. Shiana-kane was startled, turned around, hid the sadness in her voice, forced a smile, and said somewhat unhappily, Ah, you've already gone to finish the snacks. I waited for you for a while, but when I didn't see you coming back, I went over to satisfy my appetite. Ah, senior sister, do you want to eat too? How about we go and buy another one now? Ah. Eat, what can you eat? If you don't want to eat, go home immediately. Kinya Kazuma looked at her sullen look, hiding the sadness in her heart, and couldn't help laughing. Shianakian became a little anxious and tugged on his clothes. Why are you laughing? Don't laugh. Chianyu Kazuma approached him and imitated in a low voice, Where did this bad guy go? Fortunately, I dressed up specially. Really, it's only been 20 minutes and you didn't wait for me. Shiana-kane was stunned for a moment, and her body instantly burned. She reached out her hand in panic and tried to cover Asahi Kazuma's mouth. But he didn't expect Kinya Kazuma to get close to her and suddenly pin her against the wall. Senior, do you want to have dessert with me? You're too close. Shiana-kane didn't dare to look at his face at all. She stretched out her hand to give him a symbolic push. I just saw that you have been a little depressed and unhappy recently, so I just want to eat something sweet to vent my anger. I know. Kinya Kazuma's voice became softer. I know, I'm sorry, your recent mood has affected you. Qian Yufengjian looked at her for a long time and suddenly laughed out loud, but my mood has improved, so I don't need to be comforted. Oh, by the way, I was just teasing you, I haven't eaten yet. He paused for a moment, and while she looked nervous, he gently stroked the ends of her hair and said, Of course, if someone strongly expresses that she wants to go for dessert with me, then maybe we can go there together now. Shiana-uman? Kinya Kazuma gently rubbed her head and said, What are you thinking about? The time is coming. If you don't go back, you won't be able to explain to your uncle. He took her hand and turned towards the door. Suddenly, a pull behind him made him stop. What? Shiana-yuan was silent. Let's go, it's time to go back. Oh, I. Her voice was trembling and her eyes were wandering, but she still reached out and tugged at the hem of his clothes, put her legs together, and said coyly. Did you forget something? Huh? I didn't forget anything. You said you wanted to go get dessert. No, you have to go home. Jian Yufengjian waved his hand. You said you wanted to go for dessert. Shiana-kane's voice rose a little higher. She had always had an awkward personality, and even if she was fully prepared, she still wanted him to send out an invitation. She opened her mouth, instinctively wanting to hint that he would take the initiative. Suddenly, she remembered the afternoon when her father came to visit the school. He stood in front of her, fighting for more free space with his father without being humble or arrogant. No matter how well-mannered he is, it is still somewhat overwhelming. He was still so young and should have been at his most youthful and frivolous time. If it wasn't to help her, why would he do this? Yes, she should go home now. But she didn't want to, so she pursed her lips and repeated again, You said you wanted to go for dessert. Chianyu Kazuma was stunned, turned back to look at her, and suddenly smiled, Well, I want to go to have dessert, how about you go with me, senior? She said softly. Uncle sighed. Shianakian said dully, you said that I would leave it to you to solve the problem. Kinya Kazuma chuckled lightly and held her hand. She struggled for a while, then reluctantly gave up her resistance. He said, let's go together. In the afternoon sunshine, the two of them walked farther and farther towards the road where the heat still lingered. I have a guest at home, so I am writing a little slowly. I have increased the number of words. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. We've traveled through Tokyo, who still wants to simulate love? Author, Fei Se Huixiang. Chapter 76. As expected, Xiana Yuan, who came home much later than usual, was questioned by her parents. Xiana Cg knew that his daughter's passionate attitude towards you would be difficult to escape from your control, but he didn't expect it to happen so quickly. In the dessert shop that afternoon, Xiana Uman got her wish and ate the dessert she wanted, and you also got your wish and tasted the rosy corners of her mouth. The life that has always been boring without much change makes her seem to be used to it all, just like a withered immortal grass that comes into contact with the water source at this moment, so it blooms again quickly. But did this re-energized life fill the corner of his lips with too much flavor? Xiana Kane didn't know that she was a little resistant to such a change, but under his brutality, she felt the taste of the special midsummer snacks spreading between her lips and teeth. Now she can no longer hide her posture. Xiana Cg clearly noticed this. After realizing all this, Xiana Cg dialed your phone number and invited you to come home on the weekend. You readily agreed. The scene unfolds. At the door of Xiana's house, Asaba Kazuma saw Xiana Cg, whom he hadn't seen for a while. Perhaps it was because he had been painting and cultivating his sentiments for a long time. When Xiana Cg stood at the door of his house, he had a straight figure, and you could vaguely see that he must have been a lovable and handsome boy when he was young. Here we come. Xiana Kiyoshi nodded towards him and said, go in first, my daughter happens to be at home today. Kinya Kazuma nodded and followed him in. Xiana Cg's clogs clicked on the wooden board, making a babbling sound. When passing by a courtyard, he suddenly raised his head and looked at the corner of the courtyard in the distance. Chienyu Kazuma saw him stop and raised his head to look. Amidst the gurgling water in the courtyard, a melodious violin sound rang out, and the melodious sounds of musical instruments intertwined and fell into Chienyu Fenma's ears, showing an indescribable harmonious flavor. Even though Asaba Kazuma didn't know much about the violin, the softness and comfort of the sound echoing in his ears were undeniable. Especially since he has the same talent as her, he can feel the beauty blooming in this voice even more. What a nice view. He sighed subconsciously and didn't even realize whether he was praising the beauty of Xiana Yuan playing in the courtyard or admiring the notes she played. Or maybe it's both. His eyes glanced at the beautiful woman wearing a kimono sitting in the courtyard, who was Xiana Kane's mother. Do you understand? This is Hian's violin. Just seeing her standing there, you can feel the world focusing on her at this moment. She is a natural performer. My wife and I firmly believe so. Xiana Kiyoshi took out a cigarette and lit it. That's true. Kinya Kazuma said with rare approval. If it were you, you should be able to understand this feeling better. This is a treasure given to you by God. Countless people spend their entire lives unable to touch the bottom line of you people. But you can easily let go of this treasure that everyone is crazy about and embark on an unknown road. Kinya Kazuma was confused for a moment, and then he understood something instantly. Yes, he finally understood the real reason why Xiana Kiyoshi was so stubborn. Is this how Uncle Xiana views genius disease? Xiana Cg has always known that Xiana Uman suffers from genius disease after her high fever that year. Xiana and his wife already knew about this. Field adjusting genes is not a secret on Xiana Cg's side. You realize that they are different from you. Because you have a love simulator, you actually always know what talent Shiana Yuan has and what direction it can develop in. But the Shiana couple don't know that whether it is absolute pitch or profound memory, it is different from the body's physical enhancement type adjustment genes that have obvious changes in the body, and cannot be displayed intuitively. Shiana Yuan's real problem lies in the conflict between her determined talent and her uncertain future. This is the truth behind the cage, hidden behind the deep-rooted thoughts of the Shiana family, the real pillar that makes them unshakable. Yuan actually has no choice. When Shiana Kiyoshi said this, his eyes were fixed on you, as if he wanted to force you to give up some unrealistic ideas in this way. But you have figured out the fate of your father-in-law and told him bluntly that only you can realize Shiana Kian's talent faster. The fact is that since the two of you often stay together, her violin skills are indeed remarkable increased. Shiana CG couldn't refute it. In fact, after Shiana Kane came home yesterday, he told his family that he would not give up the violin, but he would not give up going to the Tokyo University School of Medicine. Shiana CG thinks that his daughter has not really thought about her future, so she rashly plans to embark on an almost completely unfamiliar path because of your influence. You silently handed over a gift and apprenticeship invitation to Shiana CG, hoping to be cultivated by Shiana CG and realize your painting talent. The scene unfolds. Shiana Kiyoshi sighed, "You guys are really willful based on your talents." He couldn't refuse. The opportunity to obtain a reliable successor is right in front of him. His dull face couldn't help but show a little surprise. What is most important to a Shiana artist? Answer: there are heirs from their parents who can perfectly inherit or even completely surpass them. Is there anything more important? Answer: there are two such heirs. He looked deeply at the young man and said casually, "A good heir? That's okay. It means you have joined my Shiana family." Zi. The melodious violin sound suddenly made a noise. In the distance, Shiana Yuan's face turned red. What does it mean to join the Shiana family? It's as if he has become a son-in-law. Shiana Kane, who had been in the courtyard pretending to be immersed in the violin playing, couldn't stand it any longer. "Dad." She trotted over with some annoyance, "wanting to study medicine is my own choice and has nothing to do with Senior Kinyu." Shiana Kiyoshi waved his hand, shook his head and left without saying anything more. Shiana Kane looked at the scene dumbfounded, turned to look at Asaba Kazuma and said, "Thank you for agreeing just now. Aren't you afraid that my father will go one step further and make you the son-in-law of the Shiana family?" When she said this, her beautiful eyes flashed slightly, and she subconsciously looked at Asahi Kazuma. When she mentioned the word son-in-law, she always felt inexplicably shy and did not dare to look into his eyes. Could he have misunderstood? She is a girl, and of course she is curious about Asahi Kazuma's attitude towards this. Kinyu Kazuma shook his head helplessly. The senior sister was getting bolder and bolder. "What, you want to be my wife?" As soon as these words were spoken, Asahi Kazuma regretted it. He really couldn't afford to promise her this humming future. If this simulation can't solve it, then find a place, hide, and die quietly. This way you can live a good life without me, right? He quietly hid the confusion in his eyes. Shiana Yuan subconsciously looked at him, wanting to see how he was teasing her with a smirk, but to her surprise, what she received in response was his lowered gaze. "Not as happy and excited as I imagined." Somehow, she suddenly felt that he was worried. "After I finished writing, I felt dissatisfied, so I almost deleted and rewritten it. It took me a lot of time. I'm sorry." We've traveled through Tokyo. Who still wants to simulate love? Author, Fei Se Huasiang. Chapter 77. When leaving Shiana's house that day, Shiana Kane hesitated for a moment under his father's serious gaze, but still stood up to see you out. At the door, she quietly tugged at your collar and asked if you were unhappy recently. Looking at her somewhat confused look, those dark eyes looked at you like a deer in a daze. You seemed to have returned to the night when you just escaped from the basement. At that time, she also looked at you with such a panicked look. She no longer had the well-hidden playfulness in the past, and only the sobbing murmurs were left. The bursts of mourning linger in your ears, making you almost unable to restrain your surging heartache. You can only hide your restless heart in this body that is entering the countdown. You decide to calm her down a little, but you don't know that Xianyuan is a very perceptive person. Both you and she have absolute sense of sound, so you can be like her, able to control your emotions and carefully hide your thoughts so that no one can discover them. So, when she comes into contact with you, she becomes accustomed to not listening to your voice, but looking into your eyes. She obviously feels that you have been feeling low recently, but she doesn't know how to comfort you. Kinyo Kazuma scratched his head. Xianyuan's ability to detect other people's emotions has become stronger and stronger. Even without absolute pitch now, her judgment of other people's emotions has become much better than before. He had a hunch that if he didn't adjust his condition, Xianyuan would soon notice what he had deliberately concealed. He continued to look at the simulation. There is always the sword of Damocles hanging above your head, which does not affect your continued research on gene-stabilizing reagents. In early September, you have successfully sorted out the relevant information. The next step is to absorb the relevant knowledge on your own and see if you can seek breakthroughs in certain fields. A few days later, you received a message from your parents in your hometown in Kumamoto Prefecture, saying that your cousin, who had a good relationship with you in the past, was taking your little cousin to Tokyo, and she might drop by to see you. The appearance of your cousin and niece appeared in your mind, and you felt a little emotional for a moment. You haven't seen your lovely niece for a long time. You estimated the time it would take for them to arrive in Tokyo, about an hour after school tomorrow afternoon. You thought about it and decided to pick them up. The next day, it started to rain heavily, and the temporary pickup and drop-off plan was cancelled. Your cousin sent you a message online, saying that he planned to take his 5-year-old daughter to eat while the rain didn't stop, and asked you not to go specifically to pick her up. The scene unfolds outside the main teaching building of Bian High School. Kinyo Kazuma raised his head and looked at the pouring rain outside, feeling secretly grateful in his heart. Whenever a heavy rain day comes, the humid air always makes his nose slightly uncomfortable, so when he went out today, he specially took a raincoat. Looking at the men and women sharing an umbrella on campus, Asahi Kazuma felt a little emotional about the beauty of youth. On rainy days, use an umbrella. Men and women, side by side. This is a special event that creates a large amount of cash. Of course, this matter has nothing to do with him. Because he didn't bring an umbrella at all. Just as he was thinking this, Xianyuan's voice suddenly sounded, "Junior Kyanba, why are you standing at the door of the teaching building?" Xianyuan was confused for a moment, glanced at the translucent raincoat, and suddenly realized. "Ah, I forgot. You usually go to and from school directly by bus, so you rarely bring an umbrella." Asahi Kazuma glanced at her. Xianyuan's hands were now empty, and he said helplessly, "Aren't you the same? I brought a raincoat anyway, but your hands are empty." The main reason is that the bus stop is right in front of the school. He really has no interest in carrying an umbrella home. Today, he can bring a raincoat, but he is already worried about getting wet on the way to the bus stop. Xianyuan nodded, took out his backpack, paused for a moment, and showed an embarrassed expression on his face. "Can I borrow your raincoat and go to the convenience store to buy an umbrella?" Kinyo Kazuma glanced at her and said, "Forget it, I'll buy it for you." Xianyuan's eyes rolled, and she leaned over and whispered, "Don't bother me, just take it off." Asahi Kazuma? What a powerful vocabulary. Complaining was a complaint, but seeing her insistence, he took off his raincoat and handed it over. The translucent raincoat was draped around her body, as if surrounded by bubbles. "Then I'll set off." She took a step forward, thought of something, then turned around and said, "Wait for me, don't run away, I'll be back soon." Chienu Kazuma remembered the incident of eating dessert before, and said in a dumbfounded way. Okay, if you don't want to run away, don't run away. Okay, wait for me. It was okay if she didn't say it, but if she did, Chienu Kazuma felt a little uneasy. Looking at Shianakian running into the rain, he stretched out and prepared to play with his mobile phone. Then, he saw Shianakian's school bag on the shoe cabinet at the door of the teaching building. Did you forget to bring your bag? Not to mention your mobile phone and credit card. He took a second look and saw that the small tail string of her mobile phone was still hanging outside the zipper on her school bag. Asaba Kazuma? He covered his face in pain, as if he had seen the scene where Shianakian went to the convenience store and couldn't pay the bill after buying something. He knew that Hian's mobile phone and bank card were linked together. After thinking for a moment, Asahi Kazuma decided not to let her embarrass the master. Although the senior sister protects herself very well, she is still a little bitch at heart. When something like this happens, the calmness she pretends to be is of no use. He took off his coat, put it on her backpack, and ran directly outside the water curtain. Soon, he saw Shianakian striding forward on the road. Before he could get closer, Shianakian's ears twitched slightly. She turned her head and looked at Asaba Kazuma with some confusion. I didn't bring my cell phone or credit card with me. I'm impressed. He walked over despite the rain. Shianauman immediately looked at the school bag wrapped in a coat, and then looked at the thin school uniform that was soaked by the rain. The graceful lines of Asaba Kazuma's upper body were vaguely visible. Her face became irritated. She lowered her head, slowly untied her raincoat, held it up, and placed it over his head. That way you won't get wet in the rain. Asahi Kazuma. This action is a bit like a hen protecting her chicks in the game of eagle catching chicks. It's a bit hard to put into words. The small space of the raincoat still carries her faint lingering fragrance. His nose twitched. She blushed even more. Shianauman said, my hands are wet. My mobile phone is on the top floor. Kazuma, please help me pull it. Okay. He rummaged around and quickly found a stick with a thick wrist. His hand was faster than his thoughts, and he pulled it out directly. It was an umbrella. Shianauman. Asahi Kazuma. Shianakian forced a smile and said, the umbrella is broken. Chienu Kazuma nodded, yes, I know. Then he took out his cell phone and wallet and stuffed them into her pockets. She made a dry smile to deal with it. How about we go to the fried chicken restaurant next door to take shelter from the rain? What a blunt transition. It was obvious that she was at a loss for words. Asahi Kazuma nodded. It just so happens that the rainy day came suddenly, and I also want to eat something hot. Shianakian breathed a sigh of relief and turned her head sideways. Her white shoes were making tangled circles on the ground. This action of supporting her raincoat made it difficult to move forward. Asahi Kazuma said, raise it higher. She subconsciously raised her head. Asahi Kazuma turned his backpack to the front, and in her panic, he directly picked her up and walked towards the fried chicken restaurant with the bright billboard in the distance. We've traveled through Tokyo, who still wants to simulate love? Author, Fei Se Hui-Xiang. Chapter 78. You guys arrived at the door of the fried chicken shop. Shianakian felt that you were already here, so she ordered something inside and waited for the heavy rain to subside. You agreed. You ordered a piece of chicken popcorn, and she ordered a piece of sweet fried chicken. At the entrance of the corridor to the second floor, you slowed down and told her that you had spent a lot of money to rent a well-equipped laboratory in a few days. I hope she can accompany him to do experiments. Shianauman nodded. She was really curious about adjusting genes, and this experimental project would be very secretive as expected. They would be the only ones present. The expectation in her eyes is a little more. Going up to the second floor, you are about to find a place to sit down, and you suddenly see someone waving hello to you. The scene unfolds. Kinya Kazuma paused and looked at the little girl on a dining table who was waving her hand towards him. Shianakian looked over. Asahi Kazuma walked over and put the tray down, then picked up the girl. Asami-chan, long time no see. Brother Kazuma, long time no see. Heian, come and sit here. Ah, Shianakian realized something, and her expression became nervous. Sure enough, when she walked over and sat down, she saw a delicate woman with a single ponytail combed in front of her body. Asaba Kazuma said calmly, Ikahire, my cousin, is now married. Asami Asaba, my cousin, is 7 years old this year. He has some memories fused with his original body, so naturally he won't be unable to recognize people. After Shianakane realized that the two people standing in front of her were relatives of Asaba's junior classmate, her expression became much more dignified. Shianakane, Asaba's, classmate. Shianayuin hesitated for a moment, but still used a neutral word. After all, someone has not confessed to her yet. Hiraika looked around Shianakian with curiosity, and an ambiguous smile appeared on her face. Era, it's rare that Kazuma is enlightened now and knows how to abduct good-looking girls. Shiana-senpai is indeed very pretty. Asahi Kazuma took advantage of the situation and sat down directly. Seeing this, Shianakane simply sat next to Asaba Kazuma. Before she could sit down safely, she saw some little Asami taking the contents of her own plate to Asaba Kazuma's plate, climbed onto Asaba Kazuma's legs and sat down. Hiraika looked amused. Asami still likes you so much, I, as a sister, am almost jealous. Shiana-uman looked steadily at little Asami sitting on Asaba Kazuma's lap, and the corner of her mouth twitched for a moment. She had always liked children before, but now she suddenly felt that they were a little bit bearish and annoying. Asami glanced at Shianakane warily, tore off a piece of fried chicken and handed it to Asaba Kazuma. Brother Kazuma, eat. Asahi Kazuma took it and ate it directly. Asami showed a happy smile, suddenly remembered something, turned to look at Shianayuin, and made a face. Shiana-uman tore into the sweet fried chicken nuggets in her hands. Use your palms hard. Damn. The chicken pieces were broken directly along with the crispy bones. She ate in small bites silently. Asahi Kazuma ordered a little less. He didn't have much interest in the high-calorie fried food, so he ordered a small portion of chicken popcorn. Hiraika, who was on the side, said helplessly, you can still be full even if you only eat this little. Shianakane's ears twitched slightly, and after a moment's hesitation, she handed a small piece of sweet fried chicken to his mouth. Chienu Kazuma didn't take it with her hands, she opened her mouth instinctively and bit into the chicken nugget slowly. Shianakian's body trembled, and her eyes began to become blurry as she looked at the scene that looked like feeding. Next to her, Hiraika held her face in her hands and kept saying Allah Allah with an ant's smile on her face. Asahi Kazuma then remembered that the relationship between him and her now was not the one that had developed into biting the same candy apple in the last simulation. His body stiffened for a moment, he finished the last bite in silence, and then turned his head. Shianakane rubbed her knees, lowering her head and not daring to look at Hiraika's expression. But after a moment, there was some doubt and happiness in her eyes. Ah, I see. In the future, he deduced, I do indeed exist. Asaba Kazuma didn't even realize that her little move had attracted Shianayuin's attention. He licked his mouth. Not to mention, the sweet fried chicken she fed was quite delicious. I'll order another meal. He patted Asami on himself. She jumped down obediently and made way for him. Watching Asaba Kazuma go downstairs to order food, Shianakane tilted her head. After a moment, she nodded to her cousin, then got up and walked downstairs. Asami is so bratty that she subconsciously wants to follow her downstairs. When Shianayuin went down, she soon heard the voice of her good cousin. Asami. What's wrong, sister? Don't go down there and do bad things. Shianouman was slightly fluctuated. Hey, Kazuma's cousin is quite nice. Downstairs, the ordering counter. Asaba Kazuma is queuing up. Hey. Shianouman, who was following quietly, suddenly bumped him with her shoulder. What are you doing? Kinyu Fengjian didn't look back, he could hear her footsteps. There is also this little gangster's way of talking to beautiful girls. From which TV series did you learn this, senior? Shianakian bent down with her hands behind her back and poked her head out from behind him. The cousin who just sat across from you, do you have a good relationship with you? Kinyu Kazuma was helpless. Seeing her like this, she would not let go until she gave an answer. My childhood playmate is like an eldest sister. She takes good care of me. When I came here this time, my mother asked her to stop by and see me. She probably wanted to see how my life was like living alone. Oh, let me tell you, your cousin is quite cute. Chianakane's voice was a little cheerful. It's just a little wordy sometimes. That's it? I quite like someone with this kind of personality. Do you mind if I add her online? After Kinyu Kazuma stared at her, he said, this is a matter between you two. Why do you ask me? This senior sister could no longer hide her emotions in front of him, and she looked like she wanted to be taken care of by her cousin. I'm so envious. I'm an only child, Shianouman said with a smile. Then she looked at the menu. What do you want? Qianyu Fengjian hesitated for a moment, and then said calmly, sweet fried chicken. Shianakane was stunned for a moment, then softened again, and said to him with a smile. Kazuma, you imitate me, do you want me to feed you again? Perhaps because she had just taken off her raincoat when she entered the store, her clothes were a little tight under the raincoat. The loose lines of the school uniform have become a bit clearer. She was a little close, and Qian Yufengma could even smell the refreshing fragrance on her body. When she turned her head, she saw Shianakian staring at her leisurely, her long eyelashes flickering, and her eyes filled with a feeling of aura. Playful flavor. Why do I want to learn from you? Qian Yufengjian denied without hesitation. I just saw her eating it so deliciously, and I was a little curious to try it. Asaba Kazuma didn't look any further. After finishing speaking, he continued to line up quietly. Seeing that he was ignoring her again, Shianakane wished that she had just broken his waist when she carried him in. I really want to punch him in the face. Woo, forget it, I can't bear to part with it. She looked at the other menus. Ah, what should I order? A whole ice cream pancake. She struggled for a long time, deciding not to control her diet today. Qianyu Kazuma glanced at her and suddenly said, you didn't forget to bring your mobile phone and credit card down again, did you? Shianayuan's expression froze. Asaba Kazuma sighed, so you're not here to order food? Ah, actually the main thing is to come down and use the bathroom. The bathroom is on the second floor. Ah, it's on the second floor? That's because I made a mistake. I'll go up first. The tips of Shianakane's ears turned red again. How many times is this today? Really, did you come here just to chat with me? Qian Yufengjian was helpless. He didn't know if it was his misunderstanding, but he always felt that his senior's recent offensive had become a little more intense. Seemingly noticing that Asaba Kazuma was lost in thought, the waitress in the front row said softly, guest, are you sure? After coming back to his senses, Asaba Kazuma nodded, order some sweet fried chicken. Is there anything else you need? Order me another one. When Asaba Kazuma went upstairs with the freshly baked meal, he happened to see Shianakane walking downstairs with his mobile phone and credit card. She looked at Asaba Kazuma's dinner plate. Inside, an ice cream pancake looked very good. After a moment, another smile appeared on her lips. You imitate me again. Ms. Shiana, the ice cream pancake you ordered has arrived. Asaba Kazuma imitated the waiter's words. The soft light in Shianakian's eyes became a little more intense. Asahi Kazuma didn't say much, he just passed her upstairs, and then took her wrist. Going upstairs. She wanted to struggle, but gave up after a moment. Shianakane didn't even realize that when he was pulling her upstairs, a smile spread across her lips. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. We've traveled through Tokyo, who still wants to simulate love? Author, Fei Se Huixiang. Chapter 79. Shianauman added Hire Ika's line, seemingly wanting to learn about your past from your relatives, and your cousin readily agreed. Ika Hire brought an umbrella, and Asami Asaba also had a small raincoat in her backpack, so Ika held the umbrella and sent her senior sister to the bus booth, and Yu and Asami walked slowly with their raincoats on. During this period, whenever Mommy-chan made eye contact with Shiana-senpai, she would make an unhappy face with Shiana-yuin, and then hold your hand tighter. This scene will make you laugh, Hire Ika helplessly said to Shiana-kane. Asaba Asami is a brother controller, but not a bad boy. Shiana-uman nods to express understanding. You got on the same bus, and Shiana-yuin arrived at the stop early. Before getting off, you quietly told Shiana-yuin that you would talk about some details of the specific preparation of the gene stabilization reagent later. Shiana-uman nods to express understanding. Shortly after she got off the bus, after the bus arrived near your home, Hire Ika and Asaba Asami went to your temporary residence. After arriving home, you and Shiana-yuin have been chatting about some preliminary preparations online. When you encounter some more sensitive content, you usually choose to change the code name. This little secret that only you two know fascinates Shiana-yuin. Not long after, you suddenly felt that the water stains on your shirt made you a little cold. Just as your cousin came out and told you that the hot water was ready, she asked you if you wanted to take a shower first. You choose. Continue chatting, and then there is a certain chance of catching a cold. Put down your phone and go take a bath. Open the phone and hand it to Asaba Asami to watch the video. Free simulation. Asahi Kazuma looked at the three options. The option he directly eliminated. Although I don't know if a cold will cause a major outbreak of genetically modified diseases, I can avoid catching a cold if I can. To be honest, he now has a psychological shadow over colds and fevers. The options are quite satisfactory, and I can't see any changes after choosing them. Option. I'm afraid it will lead to some interesting results. Asami, the brother controller, is obviously somewhat hostile to Yuin. If he unlocks the phone with his fingerprint and puts it in her hands, some unexpected surprises may happen that he doesn't expect. For example, if Yuin suddenly sent him a message while he was taking a bath, God knows how little Asami would use his phone to reply. Wait a minute. Asaba Kazuma suddenly remembered some details on the way to the bus station. After simulating the memory input, he remembered that Hire Ika said that she and Asaba Asami went to his mother's place before coming up to Tokyo. He was also complained by his mother, my son, Kazuma, has been in Tokyo for several years and has not been in love yet. Does he like men? The most interesting thing is that at the end of the joke, the mother seemed a little worried, and asked Asami to quietly observe her son's condition. Asahi Kazuma smiled. In other words, in option, there is a high chance that Asami Asaba will do something small. If it is like this. Decided, choose. After unlocking the phone with your fingerprint, give it to Asami and let her watch the video while you take a bath. Asami Asaba nodded obediently when you changed into a yukata and prepared to take a bath. When you passed by the living room, you found that Asami had already started watching the video. The scene unfolds. The bathroom of this temporary home is directly opposite the living room. Unfortunately, due to room design issues, the sound insulation effect is not very good. Even as Asaba Kazuma took a bath, she could hear the sound of the video played by Asami. You can even hear Asami complaining to her cousin, saying that she kept looking at her phone and laughing all the way. It must be because of that bad woman. After a while, he said strange words such as Brother Kazuma's chastity will be protected by me. Asahi Kazuma laughed muffledly in the bathroom. He was snickering because he was chatting with his senior sister. That was because I thought that I would soon be able to cooperate with my senior sister to produce a batch of gene stabilizing reagents, and I was very happy about this. If the gene stabilization reagent is easy to use and can it effectively alleviate the load caused by the 4 adjusted genes, that would be a great thing. Can you be unhappy? But you can't blame Asami for having a bad temper. Asami Asaba's home was originally close to his home in Kumamoto Prefecture. In the girl's not-so-long life, she was the most handsome person she had ever met. In addition, he was really good to the well-behaved Asami in the past, but now he suddenly finds out that Shiina Senpai has invaded the territory occupied by her original version, and it is strange that he can be happy. Suddenly, he heard the line notification tone. If you want to be Brother Kazuma's girlfriend, let me test you, Mommy's muttering came from outside the door. The sound was not loud, and it was difficult for ordinary people to hear it clearly. But Asahi Kazuma had an absolute sense of pitch and could hear it clearly. Huh? Shiina Senpai sent a message. The simulation screen is storyboarded again. The other side of the camera is fixed on Shiina Yuine. She rolled slowly on the bed, and after a while, she secretly sent a message to Asaba Kazuma's line account. The main inquiry is about some regular course content of the medical department. Not long after, news from Kinya Kazuma came. Shiina Kiin quickly opened her phone and saw a line of cold text. Sorry, I'm going to be a 3rd grader soon. I want to go to Tokyo University. Let's not chat anymore. It will disturb my study. Shiina Kane's face quickly darkened, and then showed a bright smile the next second. Ah, is it Asami-chan? As alert as Shiina Yuine was, she immediately discovered the problem with this content. Thinking of the way Asami bared her teeth today, she instantly got the answer. Asami is so small that it is naturally impossible for her to understand what students from top universities need to spend a lot of time to learn. Shiina Kane pretended that she didn't know that the other person was Asami-chan, and then replied directly. Is it because of that incident? She seemed to be able to imagine that at Kazuma's house, little Asami's little head was flashing with confusion. With a squeak, I couldn't help but burst out laughing. Asami Asaba responded quickly to the message, just forget about boring things like this. Shiina Kiin's smile deepened. Kazuma rarely said this kind of words to Zolai. The person holding the cell phone opposite was indeed not him. Or, how could he say such a thing to himself? She is very confident about this. So she posted again. That's too much. It's obviously my first time too. Not long after, another tentative sentence came over. It's just a date. Everyone is doing something, so it won't give you any thoughts that you shouldn't have, right? Sure enough, it's really little Asami. I didn't understand it at all. A devilish smile appeared on Shiina Kane's face, and she immediately replied, did you also play with me on that date? That's right, it's just for fun. Since you don't like me, why do you still sleep with me when we go on a date? Doubts flashed across Asami's small eyes, and she didn't notice that Asaba Kazuma, who had finished taking a bath, was standing behind her. Little Asami muttered, so tired after going on a date? Do you need a rest in between? Asahi Kazuma, who was peeking quietly from behind, almost burst out laughing. He watched her typing on the 9-square grid keyboard and replied, I just took a nap. After a while, Shiina Kiin replied, what about the child in my belly? Asami Asaba? She slowly put down Asahi Kazuma's cell phone. Even Kinha Kazuma behind her could see her face turn red instantly. Ah! As slow as she was, she also reacted at this time. She was so angry that she kept shaking. She sent another message to confirm, "Are you sure it's my brother's child?" After a moment, she hurriedly withdrew the message, and then sent another sentence. "Are you sure the child is mine? That's too much. I've obviously never slept with anyone else except you." Puff. Kinya Kazuma couldn't hold back anymore and laughed out loud. Asami turned her head stiffly and looked at him in confusion. Those eyes almost turned into a pie chart of confusion, and shock. A moment later, she threw herself at Hiraika, who had just returned from shopping, and cried loudly. "Sister Ika! Brother Kazuma has turned into a misbehaving boy. He has children." "Hiraika?" Then her eyes lit up quietly. "Whose family does it belong to?" Asaba Kazuma laughed heartily, shook her head and said, "Senior Shiina just guessed that Asami was using my mobile phone to reply messages to her, so I just teased her." Ikahire nodded and looked at Asaba angrily. A subtle smile appeared on Asaba Kazuma's lips. She opened line and replied. "Then you have to take good care of yourself, for the sake of our children. Disconnect the internet and reconnect on behalf of mommy. Chien Kazuma is officially online." Shiina Yuine didn't realize the seriousness of the problem, so she quickly sent another message. "You have some conscience, you always like to play games with a mask, and you are not afraid of getting into trouble." Kinya Kazuma suppressed a smile and replied, "Then you don't like it?" "Like it? That's all right. Senior sister is also very pretty and delicious. The sweet fried chicken tastes very good. I can take the initiative to deliver food next time. Why have you gone quiet?" In Shiina Kane's bedroom, Shiina Kane had already realized something was wrong and had lowered her head. She was so red that she didn't dare to speak. After a moment, she bit her lower lip gently, opened her mouth and sent a voice message, then, "I will cook you the main course tomorrow." Kinya Kazuma quickly clicked on the voice button. Then, "I'll cook you the main course tomorrow." Asami Asaba. Hiraika. Asaba Kazuma? Then, Asaba Kazuma's phone rang. Hiraika looked at Asaba Kazuma with something wrong in his eyes, and said excitedly, "Brother, it's okay. Why are you standing there? Answer the phone." "I coded until I fell asleep." We've traveled through Tokyo. Who still wants to simulate love? Author, Fei Se Huasiang. Chapter 81. Chapter 81. Cultural Festival is coming. On the eve of the cultural festival, you came out of the laboratory, sent her home early, and then turned around and returned to the laboratory. After the first batch of gene-stabilizing reagents were produced, you decided to conduct animal experiments first and then switch to human experiments. But it is difficult to find organisms with adjusted genes among animals. You can only obtain gene induction reagents first, and then take the next step. Although there is no way to directly reproduce Professor Fujiki's results on gene induction reagents, you have other ideas in mind. You choose. Announce the existence of the adjuster to social media and claim that he has a solution, gaining the attention of national-level forces. Contact Genji Group and obtain technical support from Genji for gene induction reagents on the condition of further developing gene-stabilizing reagents /. We've traveled through Tokyo. Who still wants to simulate love? Author, Fei Se Huasiang. Chapter 82. On this day, she did not return home for a long time, and the phone call from home was hung up not long after. Tokyo in October still carries the heat after summer, but it is far less than the rising temperature of U2. Before going to bed, in the bathroom, you put your newly bought toothbrush and mouthwash cup next to your mouthwash cup. Hers is red, and yours is blue. New bowls and chopsticks appeared on the table, and you deliberately chose the same white porcelain bowl and chopsticks as you. The night is getting darker. You two hug each other and fall asleep. She seems to be a little tired and falls asleep early. You look at her quietly, gently lift her hanging hair, and peck her lips gently. She let out a whimper in her sleep. You paused for a moment and were about to retreat quietly, but she hugged you tightly. The scene unfolds. Go on, I'm still sleeping. She didn't open her eyes, but just murmured like she was talking in her sleep. Kinya Kazuma watched her wrap around her like an octopus, with her head raised and her eyes closed, as if she was asleep. That's so cute. There was a hint of smile in the corner of his eyes. He gave a bad smile, leaned forward gently, and rubbed her neck. When she shook her head restlessly, he suddenly kissed her again. Xianyuan's body stiffened and her breathing began to become deeper. He greedily went back and forth until her movements gradually relaxed, and then he continued to explore. Her resistance was much less. It wasn't until she was infected with his own scent that Jianyu Kazuma let her go and said in her ear, "Sleep peacefully." Xianakian's back was turned to her, and she couldn't sleep for a while. She recalled the day when he visited her home and hoped to become her father's student, her dark eyes sparkling. Speaking of which, she thought he would say something embarrassing like, "As long as I become my senior's fiancé, we will share will and woe." After all, no matter how good the heir is, how can he compare to his own son-in-law? It's a pity that it didn't happen in the end. This made her a little strange and a little confused. He obviously wanted to take possession of her, but he always took a tentative step forward and then quietly retreated. After several back and forths, she became a little anxious and had more ideas. She really couldn't understand, what was he afraid of? She is not one of those black widows who wants to drain her husband after marriage and then murder him. Although the Shiana family is not rich, it is definitely not poor. If he marries her, won't everything in the Shiana family belong to him? She had always been smart, and after thinking about it for a moment, she realized that this must not be the reason for his retreat. There must be something that made him hesitate, even fear. She wanted to help him find it, just like he had helped her. Of course, she was a girl after all, so he kept silent. When he got anxious, she would occasionally think, "Please, the one standing in front of you now is the talented beautiful girl Shiana Kane. If there is anything you can't handle, just say it. Why are you so hung up?" Oh, she herself was debating whether to ask or not. That's okay. But, I really want to plan a future with him. So one day, she quietly asked her mother at night, "Mom, can people just fall in love without getting married?" At that time, her mother helplessly ruffled her newly arranged hair and told her, "If fireworks are going off outside, the food in the neighborhood is fragrant, and a family is walking hand in hand on the street, you can just hold back your tears." Shiana Yuan imagined that scene. Not to mention, it's quite scary. Although she was the kind of person who liked to enjoy a quiet life, she also thought about living with him, cooking for him, being held by his hand when leaving the house, and then returning home. Just thinking about it makes you feel happy. But she always felt that she couldn't understand his thoughts. But she soon understood. That was what I saw when I was passing by a small shop after school one day. There was an old couple sitting quietly under the door. The old man didn't know what he thought of. He raised his head and looked at the old woman for a few seconds. The old lady suddenly turned her head shyly and said coquettishly, "Old man, why do you always look at me?" The old man smiled and said, "If you haven't seen enough, just watch it. I'll be happy watching it every day." When she heard this as she was passing by, she subconsciously smiled. A person's eyes can reveal a lot of information. If you really miss someone, your words can be deceptive, but your eyes can't deceive you. A true lover can express all his love with just one look. This is what her mother told her. Just like his parents, the two eyes that look at each other reveal tenderness and attachment for each other, and at the same time, the corners of their mouths can't help but raise slightly. Just like when Kazuma looked at her sometimes. She believed that look and asked no more questions. Sensing that his breathing was gradually calming down, She quietly turned around and raised her head. It was no longer him asking for a kiss, but her peck on the corner of his lips like a dragonfly. Not to mention, this feeling is really different from doing it by himself. We'll be fine, right? She whispered, trying to curl her body into his arms. You sleep in each other's arms, holding each other's thoughts that are hard to tell. On this day, she and Akane had a dream. In the dream, she seemed to have returned to the time when you first confronted your father in school. She felt a little frightened that the vice principal and her father came together to say goodbye. You tell her, there is nothing to be nervous about. In the future, I deduce, after you become famous, the principal personally begs you to come back to participate in the cultural festival. That scene is much grander than your father's /. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. We've traveled through Tokyo, who still wants to simulate love? Author, Fei Hui. Chapter 83. Asahi Kazuma had her hair tied up for the first time in a long time. This feeling was really good. Shianakian stretched out and glanced at him quietly, with a bright smile flashing in his eyes. What kind of hairstyle do you like? Chienu Kazuma glanced at her. If you look like you, what hairstyle would look good with it? Shianakian pursed her lips and snickered, approached him, and restricted him to the bedside. Choose one. He was distracted by her and said hesitantly, then, single ponytail. Shianakian's eyes turned into crescent moons. Ah, so you like this? She quietly got up, then wait for me. After breakfast, we will go to school together. Good. After he finished cleaning up the messy room, he went downstairs. In front of the bathroom mirror, he saw the pair of wash cups. The red cup is close to the blue cup, and the toothbrush inside is still stained with water drops. Her toothbrush leaned crookedly against the edge of his. Asayu Kazuma's expression softened a bit. After brushing his teeth, he came out and saw her making breakfast downstairs. Her flowing single ponytail was hanging down. She didn't know when she had put on a small white skirt, with an apron hanging in front of her body, and she was frying something in the kitchen. He gently pressed up against her from behind, held her waist and said, "If you keep doing this, I will tie you to my side and prevent you from running away." Shianakane turned over the hodanyaki with some difficulty and muttered in a low voice, "I'm not planning to run away either." Kinyu Kazuma smiled and said nothing. Kinyu Fengjian didn't make a sound, but quietly smelled the scent entwined in her hair, and a sense of peace of mind filled her body. "Let's go, the school is very busy today during the cultural festival." Qianyu Fengjian looked at her familiar little white dress, and the tenderness and attachment in her eyes were a little more. As if aware of the fluctuations in his expression, Shianakian curled her lips, poked his waist, and said meaningfully, "The person beside you today is me, not the me you predict in the future. You are jealous of yourself." Kinyu Fengjian smacked her tongue, not knowing what to complain about for a while. Shianakian pursed her lips and said, "Who said you can't eat your own jealousy? I don't have their memory, and I still think it's unfair. Okay, then from now on, let's create memories that belong to you and me," Chienu Kazuma said with a smile. She softened his resolve a little. After all, who can refuse such a girl who is dedicated to you? The two walked toward Hakuin High School, talking and laughing. Gradually, there were more and more pedestrians on the road. There are so many people this year. She was a little surprised. The people who attended the cultural festival last year were not as scary as they are now. It was only early in the morning and it was already in full swing. Just as she was thinking this, Kinyu Kazuma suddenly reached out and grabbed her wrist. "Don't get separated." Shianakian raised her head and looked at him. He walked in front and never dared to look back, but the tips of his ears began to turn red. Who said that only a woman's blush is better than a love story? Just seeing his gesture made Shianakane feel a lot better. I'm not giving you a reward just because you took the initiative. Her hands moved slightly, breaking away from his restraints, and when he looked back in surprise, she reached for his palm. So, fingers intertwined. She raised her head proudly, Qian Yufengjian laughed dumbly, and then held her hand tighter. Soon, they followed the flow of people and entered the school gate. It was quite lively today, with many customers going to various stalls to spend money. Asahi Kazuma caught sight of the apple candies displayed on one of the stalls, and with the thought in mind, she stepped forward and bought one. Seeing this, Shianakane also bought a large portion of octopus balls and walked slowly to the seat occupied by the two of them. She thought for a moment, moved her stool, sat next to Asahi Kazuma, and pushed takoyaki between the two of them. Eat something first, she said softly. Chienyu Kazuma looked at her, she had just finished breakfast and suddenly felt hungry again. She picked up a small piece of octopus ball, bit into it, and the milky aroma and heat burst out. She blew it gently and waited until the heat dissipated a little before carefully bringing it to him. He slowly ate the small meatballs, and when he saw that her fingers holding the bamboo sticks were stained with sauce, he said, "Don't move." Shianakane obeyed and stopped moving. Then Asahi Kazuma slowly slid down and gently licked the stains from the sauce on her hand. Shianakane felt the warmth coming from her fingertips. She wanted to shrink back, but was reluctant to let go. She glanced at him angrily, as if to say, "There are so many people here." She was so embarrassed that she directly put her head in, caught Jian Yufengjian off guard, bit off a small piece of apple candy, and then directed his hand to put the apple candy to his mouth. Eat. Asahi Kazuma was very thick-skinned, so he opened his mouth and bit down another piece of apple candy on the gap she had made. Maybe she bit too fast just now, so that the candy pieces around the gap broke into pieces, and when he bit into it, some of them stuck to the corner of his mouth. She subconsciously reached out her hand and gently wiped the sprinkles from the corner of his mouth. She put her fingers covered in sprinkles into her mouth, showing an attitude like a clingy kitten. "Ah, don't waste it." Asahi Kazuma gave her a complicated look. "On purpose, right?" The cultural festival was the starting point for the transformation between you and her. Apple candy witnessed the evolution of your relationship with her. It was still the familiar little white dress. Everything made you so familiar and reluctant to let go. This became more and more strengthen your determination. At noon that day, you two had been shopping for a little while, and you suddenly told Shianakane that you were going to Genji Medical for a physical examination. Shianayuin chooses to accompany you. In the office of Genji Medical, you met Dr. Hayato Funakoshi and asked him to use Genji's internal adjuster's medical examination equipment to conduct a physical examination on you, and hoped that no one else would know the specific data of the examination items. Relevant physical examination data of the adjuster. The personnel responsible for the physical examination do not understand its meaning. The only people who can interpret it are Dr. Funakoshi and others who participated in this study. Dr. Funakoshi couldn't resist you, so he finally chose to compromise and told you to get the physical examination report one day later. After completing the plan, you returned to school with Shianayuin, as if nothing happened. But you can notice that Shianayuin is looking at you more and more frequently. On the afternoon of the second day of the cultural festival, you received a call from Funakoshi Hayato. The scene unfolds. The medical examination report has come out. "Who are you?" Funakoshi Hayato's voice was filled with incredulity. "Just an ordinary student." Dr. Funakoshi on the other end of the phone made a goose call. Asahi Kazuma did not continue to answer him. Soon, he got an investigation report from Funakoshi Hayato. He read it over and over again for a long time, and finally a helpless but thankful smile appeared on his face. "Sure enough, it is as I expected. The results of the gene stabilization reagent are excellent enough, but, It treats the symptoms but not the root cause. So, aren't you going to show me, behind Asaba Kazuma, Shianayuin's voice sounded. Kinyo Kazuma shook his head and handed over the information in his hand. It's time to test your learning achievements during this period. Shianakian took it silently. Then quickly, she understood the relevant physical examination results. She quietly put down the physical examination report in her hand, looked at him and said, "So, the gene stabilizing reagent is very useful, but because its scope of action is too broad, its effect on suppressing the adjusted genes in your body is limited. It can only delay the date of gene activation and cannot suppress it in a targeted manner. If it's better, the body will be paralyzed, and if it's worse, it may have to go into hibernation." Asahi Kazuma nodded. He had actually guessed that Shianakian was suspicious. After all, just as she knew him, he knew her character too well. Shianakian looked at him quietly, and finally said, "I am very angry." Kinyo Kazuma sighed, "I know." She added, "We only need to further correct the minor issues with the gene stabilization reagent, and we will be able to control the sequelae within a certain reasonable range." She's not kidding, she has this confidence in herself. But Kyanba Kazuma shook his head and said, "It's not of much use. The end of this road is just that I have side effects and fall into a long sleep. We took the wrong road from the beginning. The technology of gene stabilizing reagents can be used as a reference. If I want to solve my body's problems, I need a more precise treatment plan for the gene chain. Heian, even if you are very smart, it will take you many years to come up with perfect results. Neither you nor I have that much time." Seeing a little melancholy in his eyes, she stretched out her feet and raised her little face. Her long eyelashes were stained with some crystals at some point. "Do you want to leave me?" Qian Yufengjian took a deep breath and whispered, "I don't mean to abandon you, I just hope you can think about it carefully. Maybe there is a more suitable way for you and me to get along, or..." He suppressed his trembling and said muffledly, "It's okay to let go, I won't blame you." Shianakane didn't know what to say for a moment, so she could only stretch out her hand and hold the edge of his coat, as if she was afraid that he would run away. "I'll help you get back the time you spend with me. If you have more time, I'll definitely get more time, just be good and don't run away, okay?" Kinyo Kazuma suddenly pulled her into his arms and whispered, "Don't look at me. I'll give you one night." "Why?" "Think carefully, don't be affected by impulse like this now. Think calmly and carefully." He tried hard to swallow the urge to cry out to her for help at the top of his lungs, gritted his teeth and said, "I just don't want you to be like this, so I won't let you get close. Do you understand what I mean?" Shianakian raised her head, "Calm down." She suddenly couldn't help but smile, and her smile was as bright as the stars. "I've always been calm." She pulled him back, looked at him quietly and said, "I'm with you, so don't leave." Qianyu was silent for a while. "A long time." He said dryly, "Okay. I went to have a big dinner with Mi Jiji, so I was a little late. We've traveled through Tokyo, who still wants to simulate love?" Author, Fei Se Huasiang. Chapter 84. Shiana Uman has made her choice, and the emotions you have been restraining can finally land safely. The future is still confused, but your heart has settled and you are at ease. She quietly asked you, how did she and you end up in the futures you deduced? You told her the ending of the two simulations. Her eyes turned red and her expression was a little subtle after hearing the tragic future. Among them, the dance at the annual cultural festival and the 100 things she wants to do with him are Shiana Uman's favorite stories. You didn't speak, just enjoying this rare piece with her. She wants to ask you to dance on the rooftop of tomorrow's cultural festival. You asked her out of curiosity, are you going to stop being jealous of yourself in the future? Shianakian pouted and said, Eat as you should. It is precisely because of jealousy that she wants to take away everything that her other self has experienced with you in the future. She wants everyone you love to be her. She gently raised her hand and placed it in front of you, as if holding her fragile heart. She looked so cute, but you smelled a faint fragrance. The scene unfolds. Perfume, Kinya Kazuma asked curiously. Although he had often smelled the fragrance of shampoo on her body, it was indeed the first time he noticed that she wore some perfume. Chianya Fuma approached slowly and smelled the slight warmth like a fireplace, and then a hint of mint and rosemary, like a summer breeze, quietly taking a deep breath. Well, the orphan girl of the Ludan family is also called Orphan's Resentment, Chianakian said with a smile, but I don't like the pretentious fragrance reviews from some users on the app. I mainly like the smell and the copywriting. After all, Asaba Kazuma also does writing work, and he also accumulates some material by watching videos every day. Although he had never smelled the scent of Orphan Girl, he remembered the copywriting of this perfume. People say she is aloof and cold. But there are always people who can see through her hidden tenderness at a glance. A coward who never has feelings. Every game is a blast. Don't disturb my purity. But I long for the warmth of ashes. To be honest, this copy somewhat coincides with hers. However, Asahi Kazuma didn't like it. He smiled and said, "Let's go back and change the perfume later." Chianakian was a little surprised. "Have you also done research on perfume?" Qian Yufengjian shook his head, but said with a very calm face, "I don't like the orphan girl, the resentment of the orphan, or the meaning of being broken into pieces." Chianakian understood what he meant. Gently tilting your head up and kissing the corners of his lips, your love becomes even hotter. It only took one look from him for her to understand what he meant. It has nothing to do with the scent and the name of the perfume. He hid his turbulent feelings in order not to get hurt. How could he want her to enjoy the loneliness of being shattered to pieces? As expected, Qian Yufengjian paused and then said, "By inversion Paris. I've smelled YSL's inversion Paris before. Although it sometimes feels cloyingly sweet, it's at least sweet enough." Chianakian said with a helpless smile, "Yves Saint Laurent's inversion of Paris, the copywriting is well done, and various promotions are made for the men's fragrance, but the fruity fragrance is really a bit too strong." She held his hand playfully and whispered, "If you want to meet me, there's no need to go to such trouble." With just one word from him, she guessed what he was thinking. She didn't like the Saint Laurent Paris inversion style very much, but the copywriting was really impressive. "I want to meet you, you choose the location." Forest desert, dim lakeside at night. The prairie sea, an excuse for the morning mist. Just not in a dream. She will seek out whether the scent of the perfume matches her. The cold fragrance of the orphan girl, that kind of quiet time with an indescribable hot feeling, was once her favorite. But she knew that he actually didn't understand perfume, and he just wanted her life not to be so difficult. It was as if the two of them had never spoken before. Approach cautiously, but afraid of harm. She likes him like this. So. Then tomorrow, I'll change it to another one. Chianakian had an inexplicable smile on his face. Chianakian raised her head with eyes wide open. Then she threw herself into his arms and had sex with him. The girl's accumulated feelings are as hot as fire, and she doesn't want to let go of your lips for a long time, enjoying his warmth. So does he. It wasn't until her breathing became more rapid that he slowly released her. You can vaguely hear the low laughter, sour sounds, and blessings of some familiar classmates. When he looked at them again, they quietly turned their heads away, not daring to look at Kinya Kazuma. "Let's go home." He held her hand and said. On the second day of the cultural festival, news about you and Chianakian began to spread wildly. There are countless young men whose dreams are shattered, and countless young girls who are dejected. System prompt: you have unlocked the dream of achieving others' youth, and the achievement point add 1. But this has nothing to do with you, you just want to enjoy the little time left with her, and then go to the empty rooftop to dance. You are still worried about whether you can give her a happy future, but this time with her by your side, you two may be able to move towards the same goal faster. Under such circumstances, the last day of the cultural festival has quietly arrived. You two seem to have forgotten everything, you are quietly arriving in every corner of the campus. The scene unfolds. Shianakane had a happy smile on her face. So, what kind of perfume did you change to? Chienu Kazuma said with a low smile. Miu Miu's, I think its aroma is not that sweet, but also has the smell of a girl in love. Its blue water seems weak and fresh, but it always has a bit of personality. Don't you think like it? No, just in terms of taste, it's just right. He felt that if he continued like this, he would have to meet women by smell. It's a pity that he didn't like the movie, and he really had no interest in perfume. As long as it's her. That's what he thought. Perfume is usually sprayed on the wrists or behind the ears because the temperature in these two places is higher, which is easier for the perfume to evaporate. But in actual interactions, these two parts take on a different meaning. There is a lingering fragrance in your hands when you hold them. The fragrance in your ears when you embrace each other. It will make the already fiery atmosphere more ritualistic, and possessive. Just like now. In a corner where few people come and go, he hugged her from behind and buried his head in the crook of her neck. The aroma of the blue water gradually spread, and he seemed to understand why some girls like perfume. Seeing his appearance, Shianakane curled her lips with an expression eager to be praised. If you keep doing this, I'm going to eat you tonight. Shianakane suddenly felt guilty. She had never experienced this before and didn't know how to deal with it. But I feel curious and excited instinctively. Would you think about it too? Why not, I'm a man too. It seems right. His hand gently caressed her face. She opened her mouth and gently bit one of his fingers. She seemed to be craving the taste of his body. Just as he gradually fell in love with his own taste. Finally, the sun sets. Along with the noisy cheers of the students, the bonfire was lit and the sound of dance music came from the speakers. In the peripheral vision, the two of them didn't dance, they just hugged each other tightly, asking for each other's warmth. It wasn't until everything was completely silent that they slowly separated. It was still the rooftop, still the same little white skirt. When he raised his head and looked at her, it felt like he was in another world. Shianakane stubbornly straightened his head and said, "You are not allowed to look at others, only look at me." "Well, it's just you now," he responded seriously. Then, the phone screen lit up, and the time for the two of them to dance began on the quiet rooftop. With her hands clasped and her white skirt fluttering, under the night, it seemed like all the figures in her simulation overlapped together. At the end of the dance, he reached out and hugged her waist. This time, he finally didn't feel like they were dancing in front of the grave. He couldn't hug her and almost made her fall. Shianauman, who was leaning down, raised her beautiful neck and said with a low smile, "Do you know what Miyamu's slogan is?" "Have no idea." "He doesn't understand perfume." With a smile in her eyes, Shianakane raised her body slightly, approached his ear, and said softly, "I want to sit with you until dusk, dance until early morning, and waste my life in darkness." Yes, just as he fell in love with the base of the perfume, Miyamu's slogan became the reason why she fell in love with it, and it was no longer because of the taste. In the moonlight, Shianakane raised her head and looked at him and said, "Will you think of me if you smell this in the future?" Kinyu Kazuma didn't say anything, but just started to kiss her hard. Shianauman felt a little dizzy, not sure whether it was from the fragrance or the kiss. But she knew he liked the taste.